Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning. So I'm pleased to welcome all the participants to join IIUM Library Darul Al-Hikmah second dialogue with publisher. And we are very fortunate to have today with us Mr. Alexander van Servellen. He is a senior consultant, research intelligence Elsevier. So for today, I would like to read a bit of his background. Mr. Alexander van Servellen have very vast knowledge and expertise about Scopus. He's currently a consultant with Elsevier, specializing in research analytics. He's based in Singapore and have a lot of academic and government institutions in Southeast Asia to make the best use of solutions that enable evidence-based policy making, monitoring, and showcasing of research performance. Mr. Alexander holds a Master of Science MSc degree in developmental psychology from University of Amsterdam, and he has been working with Elsevier since 2006. A bit information to the participant. You are free to post your question in the chat box at any time during the presentation, and Mr. Alexander will be very pleased to answer your question. At the same time, I will also read some of the questions during the Q&A session. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Alexander, and you're most welcome to start with your presentation. Please welcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the nice introduction, and a very good morning to everyone from Singapore. I hope that you're all well, healthy, and enjoying a wonderful Ramadan. Today, we're going to talk about a number of topics related to doing research, publishing, and making best use of a tool called Scopus. I'm going to present some slides. I'm going to demonstrate some things live in Scopus as well, and we'll try also to address your questions. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So I'm going to move this current screen onto a different screen. I'm going to okay, so you can now see my screen. I'm just going to run through some of this content. So the title of today's presentation is Publishing Git Notice in Scopus. It's for IIUM. I visited IIUM many times over the years and admired the beautiful campus and architecture, and I like the many translations of the Quran that were in the entrance of the main building, and the beautiful mosque. So I hope that one day I will be able to travel there in person again. Obviously, the date here at the bottom is wrong, so that's a typo. It's not June 2021, but time has flown during COVID. Yes. So sometimes I lose track of time. But the agenda is I will give a quick introduction to Scopus. I will address the topic of how to publish and get noticed, to have some thoughts on the topic that I'll share with you. We're going to take a close look at your author profiles in Scopus. So how do you leverage your author profile in Scopus? We'll look at finding the right journal. So one of the key challenges for researchers, whether you're a relatively new researcher as a student, or a more experienced faculty researcher, it's still important to find the right journal. So we'll look at some of the considerations and how you can search for certain journals. Identifying who we can work together with. So identifying experts and understanding who are leaders in a field, and considering who is your competitor, who is a potential collaborator, is an important thing. And I'll show you how to do that in Scopus, because as mentioned, every author in Scopus has a profile, and it can tell you a lot about the person. Scopus has what we call research metrics. So these are different metrics or indicators that represent different aspects of research, like the quantity or quality of research or impact of research. I will explain some of these metrics and how they can help you, where you can find them, how you can interpret them, and so forth. Lastly, I was asked to explain how Scopus selects journals for indexing. And this can be quite a big topic. Sometimes I give a full day workshop just on that. So I promise it will be a summary only. So to get started, today, a lot of what I'm talking about today is grounded in Scopus. And Scopus is a tool that you all have access to at IIUM. Scopus is a source-neutral abstract and citation database. So essentially, it's a database that collects the metadata of scientific publications that come from 7,000 different publishers. It comes from journals, conference proceedings, and books. Scopus does not include the full text. It includes metadata like the title, authors, abstract, references, and some metrics that will tell you interesting things about the papers. You can link from Scopus to the publisher webpage. If your university has access to the full text, you can access the full text via the publisher. Scopus also includes a lot of open access journals that are freely available. The full text is freely available to everyone. Some of the key use cases for Scopus. So why would you use Scopus? Well, it's a great tool for search and discovery, for keeping up to date with the world of research. As a researcher, we try to be an expert in a particular field, so it's important to read and understand what's going on. So Scopus is a great place to start that journey. But it can also help you to track and understand the individual researchers, whether it's your own profile or someone else's. It can guide the process of looking at who you wish to collaborate with, whether it's a researcher or an institution. As mentioned, you can keep track of global research trends to understand what are hot topics and what's happening. This can also guide your some of the decisions that we make as researchers. It contains a lot of journals, conferences, and books, so it could also give you some information about possible outlets to publish in. Scopus is the exclusive provider of publication and citation data to Times Higher Education and the QS World University Rankings. So the data in Scopus is used to evaluate universities around the world in that sense, and also Scopus data is used in the Malaysia's MIRA National Research Assessment for Malaysia. Currently, Scopus holds over 85 million records, so you have a lot of papers that you could find. They come from 7,000 publishers. The journals, conferences, and books come from 105 different countries. They're in 45 different languages. We have about 90 Malaysian journals that are in Scopus. Scopus has 11,000 new articles indexed every day. We cover all the major subject areas. We have, as mentioned, peer-reviewed journals, conferences, and books. Conferences are very focused on engineering and computer sciences. Books are very focused on social sciences, arts, and humanities. Journals cover all of the major subject areas. We have more than 5,000 gold open access journals, which means that everyone has access to the full text. Scopus is a curated database. That means that we carefully select which journals, conferences, and books are included in Scopus. So it's quite difficult to get a journal indexed in Scopus. We're very selective. There's a process and a criteria that I will explain at the end of today's session. But just understand that we ultimately accept less than 50% of the journals that are submitted to us. And we also re-evaluate all of the journals that are currently in Scopus, so that any journal that no longer meets the quality criteria of Scopus can be de-indexed or can be discontinued. So in that sense, Scopus is curated. We need to uphold the quality of the content that's in Scopus is very important. And that's what essentially makes it much different than Google Scholar or any other big database that does not do content selection. The data in Scopus is connected, right? So authors are connected to articles and to institutions and to co-authors and so forth. So it doesn't matter whether you search for a paper or an author. If you search for a paper, you can link from the paper to the author, and from the author to the co-authors, and from the co-authors to their papers and so forth. Or you might search for an institution and find an institution and link from the institution to the articles published at the institution, and from the articles to the authors and so forth. So it's linked data, and it makes it pretty easy to just link from one thing to the next and understand the relationships. So that's an important aspect of Scopus. So I've mentioned Scopus.com, you'll have access. That's just www.scopus.com. Within the IP range of IIUM, everyone should have access. Profiles, we have profiles for every single researcher and for every institution, as well as for every journal. We have research metrics so that you can see different aspects of the quantity and quality of research of an individual paper or a journal or a person or an institution and so forth. We have APIs, so any subscriber of Scopus can use an API. You can get access to the API to source data from the back end of Scopus, to integrate it into an institutional repository, or to publish it on a website, or there's different use cases for APIs. So that was the introduction. The next section is how to publish and get noticed. So I think one of the important challenges for the ambitious person who seeks to be a researcher, a successful researcher, is there's a need to get published, and there's a need to have people find your content, read your content. You need to make an impact. So I'm going to share just some thoughts that I have on that. At Elsevier, we thought about this, and we've looked at how does the actual research workflow go, and we mapped this out to some degree. And obviously, ideas are important. So whether we're a researcher or if you work in a company like Elsevier where we create things, we always need to come up with ideas. We need to understand, where is the edge of the current development. So I think in science, you have to think of where's the edge of human understanding in a particular domain, and what are some ideas in terms of things we wish to explore further, right? So ideas are important. It could be thinking of the right research topic. It could be looking at what's applicable. If we wish to do research that is going to be applied in some way, we might need to understand what type of research could possibly be applied, so forth. Once we have ideas, we need to look how we're going to bring that into the world. So you have a sense of planning. What type of research do we want to do? How do we get funding for that? Who do we want to work together with? Is there certain equipment that we need? What type of manuscript are we going to create? Designing. So there's always a sense of designing different aspects of, it could be your paper, of how you're going to represent your work. Writing, I think, is a super important skill, because all of the good work that we do won't really be translated into an understanding in other human beings if we don't articulate it very well and demonstrate context in terms of why are we doing what we're doing. So context is super important. And then clarity on what we're doing, how we're doing it, what the method is, what the results are, and the meaning of what we found. What are the conclusions? So I think writing is a super important skill to learn to write with some conviction. And professional scientific writing, I think, is a key skill for any researcher. Obviously, when we've done great research and we've written a fantastic manuscript, we want to find the right place to publish it. So do we want to just publish it in our institutional repository, or do we want to publish it in a conference proceeding, or do we want to publish it in a peer-reviewed journal? What quality level of journal are we seeking? We're going to talk a lot about that later. Once we've published something, maybe one paper. Maybe we've published more different papers, and maybe we've done some other work that's not represented in papers. But how do we promote visibility so that people see what we've done? I think today visibility is different than it was 30 years ago. Today, there's so many online tools. You can build your own profile, you can build your own brand, and you can reach out to people all over the world without leaving the comfort of your own home. So promotion is super important, because if we do great work and no one knows about it, it won't have the impact that it could have. So it's important to learn to connect with other people and express our ideas and bring them into the world in an effective way. Once we've done all of that, tracking is, we should understand the impact of what we've done. If you spend, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years working on something, at some point you will need to understand the impact of what you've done. How has it influenced other academics? How has it influenced industry? How has it influenced society? They could be broad, it could be very specific. There's different types of activities. You could have done something that led to a change in education of children that led to better outcomes, for example. And it's important to understand the impact of various activities and bring that understanding into the world, because ultimately we do all of this work to provide an impact and make a difference to the world, right? So science is about understanding, but it's also about evolving and making the world an even better place than it is now. So it's important to kind of track not just our performance in terms of number of papers, but also what is the ultimate impact of our work. I have a couple of thoughts that I wanted to focus on. I probably mentioned some of them already. I think to publish and get noticed, it's important to become an expert in a topic or a set of topics. In life, you don't have an infinite amount of time. So in this incarnation, we have a certain amount of years that we have to work on something. So you, at some point, you realize you cannot do everything. You have to make choices. So there are always choices to be made in terms of the domain that you pick as a researcher, which field and which specialization within that field. So I chose developmental psychology, and then I focused on something that's called executive functions. It's a very specific area. I think it's important to pick a topic that you're passionate about, that your interest can drive you over time, but also it's really good if you could pick a topic that is an important topic, either for human understanding or for some application that it could, contribute to something, the well-being of people or whatever it is. So I think it's important to pick a topic carefully, especially if you're going to invest, a lifetime of work potentially in that area. As mentioned, learning to write well is important, because writing is the way in which scientific ideas are communicated, at least a big part of it. I think writing in English is a good skill to have, because most of the researchers in the world read a lot in English. So if you're able to write in English and publish in good English journals and books, probably you will reach a wide audience. It's good to articulate with conviction, so to be able to effectively explain your ideas and why they're important, to inspire hearts and minds, right? You need to pick the right journals and other reputable platforms so that you can build a brand. Developing an online presence. So these days, there are many different places to have a profile. It's not just Facebook that we have profiles, right? In Scopus, we have profiles. In ORCID, we have profiles. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a place that people create professional profiles. These are all places that you can use to create an online presence, so that when people search for an expert, they might come across your profile. Or if they search for your name specifically and they see the profile, they can understand what you have done, and any other information that you wish to communicate. I think it's important to present at conferences and events. So writing is important, but it's also important to get to know people, to network, to meet other experts, but also meet your audience. You know, who are you looking to influence, who you're looking to communicate with. So if you can get physically in front of an audience and speak to people and get slots at events to talk about these topics that you're very passionate about, and you can listen to other people present in similar or related topics, this is a really great way to grow, but also to get to know people, network. Seek collaboration with people you can learn from. So, you know, if we're senior, we should take the time to teach others. If we are just getting started, get to know people that you can learn from, find the right mentor, but also the right peers to spend time with, do things together. We can all learn from each other if we spend time focused on things that are important to us. I just mentioned the last one already, that understanding the impact of your work is important. Showcasing that to the world is a necessity. We should not brag too much about what we do, but showcasing can be an important exercise in understanding the impact of what we've done. If we have no idea what the impact is, then it might seem rather pointless to spend a lot of time doing it. So before I go to the next section, I'm just going to ask if there are any questions at this point. Maybe we can address one or two of them.
So far, we don't have any question. So you may proceed, Mr. Alexander.
All right. Oh, sure.
All right.
So as mentioned, online presence is important. There are different platforms. You can think about creating a profile on LinkedIn, Orchid. If you have published a paper that's published in a journal that's in Scopus, then you already will have an author profile in Scopus. The author profiles in Scopus you can find. If you're on the landing page, you can see Scopus is geared around searching, and there are 3 options, and in the middle you can search for authors. You can search by last name, first letter. If it's a common name, you might wish to add the name of the university. And you would get search results in terms of author names that match what you're searching for. And you can open the author profile and you will see a lot of information about the author. Now, author profiles are used by universities, by funding bodies, by government agencies to identify experts and to understand the activities of researchers. So often in some countries, when a researcher applies for funding, the funding body receives the grant application and will look at the person applying and have a look at their author profile, whether it's in Scopus or a different database. The author profiles are used as part of evaluation processes. So it's really important to make sure that your author profile is correct and up to date. And you can make changes to your profile in Scopus if you see that anything's missing. You can also link it to your ORCID ID. And I'm going to show you how this works. But as we see here, there's a lot of information you can see on the author profile. You can see which topics an author has published in. We can see some of the awarded grants. That's something that we're working on. We can see the references, so which papers have they themselves cited in their references. We can see their H index. We can analyze the author output and analyze the citations. H index is an important metric, which is where the number of papers and citations are equal. So if this author here, Jennifer Doudna, has an H index of 105, it means that 105 of her papers have at least 105 citations or more. So it's where papers and citations match. So it's a kind of combination of quantity and quality. And it's a very often metric used to assess researchers. A high H-index usually indicates quite a high level of seniority. So a person with an H-index of 105 has definitely been doing research for a long time. We can adjust the year range. These are also details that you don't need to focus on too much, but there are different, options like excluding self-citations and so forth. Analyzing author output, we can understand which subject areas an author publishes in, how much they've published in different document types. Have they published a lot of articles, reviews, conferences, as well as which journals they've published in. So there's a wealth of information. If I'm someone seeking a collaboration partner, or if I'm a funding body thinking about, should we give the money to this person? Are they an expert in the field that we're funding? Are they a relatively senior researcher? These are all answers that they can find in the author profile.
Mr. Alexander, there's one question. Let's say
Sure.
if the author have two profiles, does it affect his or her H-index metrics?
Yes, it does, because the papers and citations will be split between two different profiles. Therefore, the metrics will be lower than if they had one profile. Therefore, they must merge those profiles into one profile, and I will demonstrate how this works. It's pretty easy to do.
Okay.
So that, super important. Good question. If you have two profiles, then probably someone's only going to find one of them, and that's a danger because they won't find all of your work. And I'll skip this part. This is citation overview. You can do really detailed citation analysis, but I want to quickly demonstrate to you in Scopus. So search for an author. I'm going to search for this very Dutch name here. And I'm going to see that I find very van den Wildenberg, Wilco van den Wildenberg, and Wilco van den Wildenberg. Now, let's assume that I'm Wilco, and I've worked at two different hospitals, so I have two profiles for some reason, and I want to merge them. I would select both of these profiles here and go here to request to merge authors. Now, when I merge it, I need to give the preferred, what's my current affiliation? So let's say I work at St. Elizabeth Hospital. I can still make changes here. So for example, if there are other documents missing, you can search for them and have them added. But if you just want to merge those profiles, you just very simply do that and submit this request. And you can see here the change is successfully submitted. That I will get an email, and it could take up to 4 weeks. Sometimes it just takes a couple days. All of these requests are validated. So if I did something that's incorrect, they won't execute it. In Scopus, it's really useful. You don't have to create a username, but it's useful to create a username because it means that you have a dashboard of all of the requests that you've made, and you'll be able to set up search alerts and do different customizations. So that's just another point. Searching, typically you just want to search for your last name. You could do first letter or first name. If you have a rather common name, you might need to add your affiliation, and it doesn't need to be the whole name of your university. It can just be like the part of the name, right? So here I'm doing R. Ridder-Rinkhoff Amsterdam, and I do a search, and I find Richard Ridder-Rinkhoff Universiteit van Amsterdam, which is University of Amsterdam. So if I click on Richard's name, a couple things. Let's pretend that I'm Richard, or I work for Richard, and this is his profile. So I can see all the stuff that we looked at previously. Now, if I want Richard's Scopus profile to link to his ORCID profile, I can click there, and it's going to sign me into ORCID. And if I authorize access, then it's going to basically link Scopus and ORCID, so that here it will it will put the ORCID ID with a link from Scopus to ORCID. So anyone who looks at Richard in Scopus can actually link from Scopus to look at all of their content in ORCID. So that's a great way to bring more people to your ORCID ID. If you're not familiar with ORCID, ORCID is an ID that you can manage yourself, and you can add any content there. So whether it's in Scopus or Web of Science or just in your repository, or whether it's a homework paper that you haven't published anywhere else, you can put anything in ORCID. You can make your ORCID profile really comprehensive. And then you can get your Scopus profile to link to your ORCID profile. So if someone finds you in Scopus, they might press that button then and get to ORCID. So that's a tip, is if you don't have an ORCID ID, think about setting one up, making it really comprehensive, put all the stuff that you want people to see there, and then leverage your Scopus profile to link there. If your Scopus profile is incomplete, there's a button here. It says Edit Profile. I'm not going to pretend I'm Richard. I'm not him, but let's say I do know him very well, so I'm going to say, oh, I'm requesting changes on his behalf, right? And I can choose a different way of representing my name. I can choose which is my current affiliation, but it's limited to institutions that I've published with. I can remove papers if they're not mine. So if there's a paper from a different author with the same name, I could remove those papers. If there are papers missing, sorry,
Mr. Alexander.
Yeah.
We have one question which related to affiliation by Mr. Rames. He said that he published many papers since November 2021, but yet the affiliation is still based on my former institution. Should I contact Scopus to change the affiliation to the current university, or should I wait? What would you advise?
So the current affiliation should change only at the point at which they publish a paper with the new institution. So if the author profile, let's say someone moves from UKM to IIUM, and they move to IIUM, but they have not published any papers that are affiliated to IIUM, then their affiliation will still say UKM. The moment that they publish a paper where their name is associated directly with IIUM, the current affiliation should change. If it isn't changed, they should come into this process here and have a look whether that's an option here. If that's not the case, they should go to the Contact Us form and go to the service desk here. There's different channels to provide feedback to Scopus.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So, and if that still doesn't work, they can email me. But I would prefer if they tried to go to the help desk. So here there's an email as well for the help desk that you can email on a number of topics. It's going to ask you for a lot of information here, but I think this is really the best way to do it, because if you send it to me, I will end up sending it to this group here. And this is a professional help desk that should address the problem. But again, once you've published a paper at the new institution, if the current affiliation doesn't change, please try this edit function and look here. If it's not here, then via this button here, you can go to Contact Us and contact the help desk. Let them know that you've published a paper with your new institution, but it's not an option in Scopus yet.
Okay. Mr. Alexander, I mean, just now you're talking about H index, yeah?
Yep.
In Google Scholar, they also have indicate the H index. I mean, does this H index the same? I mean, for Scopus and also Google Scholar, or is it different?
Good question. The calculation of the H-index is the same because the H-index is the H-index. It's the number of papers that have the same number of citations, right? However, the underlying data source is different. So Scopus has selected 25,000 journals. So Scopus is a certain number of journals, and the number of papers that an author has and the number of citations that are received are based on that selected set of journals. Google Scholar doesn't select journals. There's no list of which journals are included in Google Scholar. So it's safe to say that the collection of content they have is different to the collection of content that's in Scopus. Therefore, the number of papers that an author has in Google Scholar very likely will differ the number of papers that they have in Scopus, and the number of citations received by those papers in Google Scholar will differ to the number of citations received in Scopus. Therefore, if you apply the same calculation, so H-index is just a metric, it's a certain calculation, you apply that to Scopus profile and you apply it to the Google Scholar profile, you get two different numbers because the underlying data is different.
Okay. Okay. All right, Mr. Alexander.
Yeah. Okay. So if your profile misses papers, you can search for them and add them, right? So you might search for the title. You might pick your paper. If it's really your paper, you would find your author name here. You add the document. So again, you could remove things. You can add things. And the way that we did that, again, just to demonstrate, is we search for last name, first name, find the profile, open the profile, and press the button here, Edit Profile. Another way to find author profiles, if we, for example, look at IIUM, we see that there are 6,943 authors associated to IIUM, so we can see all of the authors that have a profile associated to IIUM. We can look at potential author matches. So here, this is a great example. You can see that Othman Khalifa has linked their Scopus profile to the ORCID ID, right? So if I am just like a person that's trying to understand the performance of this person, I have the Scopus profile, but I could also click here and understand a lot more about them based on their ORCID ID. So that's brilliant. But in Scopus, you might wonder, are there more author profiles for this person? So if I press here, potential. Now, if one of these is the same person, you could select it and merge it. So that's one way, again, to find out if you have more than one author profile, is by pressing this button here for potential author matches. So that's author profiles. My advice is really find your profile, make sure it's up to date. Consider having an ORCID ID, an ORCID profile, and linking your Scopus author profile to the ORCID profile. Consider whether it makes sense for you to have a LinkedIn profile. A lot of people are found in LinkedIn. It's also a great platform for publishing articles or, publishing, let's say, some posts and reaching audiences. So profiles are super important. So before we move on to the next section, just check, are there more questions?
Yes, we have one from Sister Anis. I'm not sure whether it's too early or not, but then is there any cost incurred for an article to be indexed in Scopus?
Anissa, good question. No. So publishing in Scopus is free. any journal which meets the quite strict criteria to be included in Scopus, there's no fee involved, right? They just need to meet that quality criteria and submit to Scopus, be evaluated and accepted. Once they're accepted, the Elsevier content team will reach out to them. There's some paperwork to be done. And then they will provide a feed of data to Elsevier, and the information will just be indexed in Scopus. So there's no costs involved to get into Scopus. It's really about meeting the quality criteria and going through the process of being evaluated.
Okay, we have another one. Does Scopus automatically link the author profile with ORCID ID, or author must do it themselves?
Author must do it themselves. So that's why I'm suggesting that you find your author ID in Scopus and make that link. There's certain things which we cannot do automatically. So that's up to you to find your profile and to make that link.
All right. Last one before we proceed to the next title is, if the article is early access, when the article will be indexed by Scopus?
What do you mean by early access? I'm not sure what the question is.
I think probably she already received notification acceptance. I mean,
oh, okay. So it will get into Scopus once the journal publishes the article and provides the data to Scopus. So we cover certain journals. The journals accept manuscripts and do peer review and accept papers. I guess, they typically, a journal publishes one issue at a time, right? So a journal might publish 4 times a year. They might publish twice a year. So you might be accepted, but they might not publish your paper until they've collected enough papers, and they probably have a schedule. So you have to check if the journal is, if it publishes 4 times a year, that means that every quarter they're going to publish an issue, and they're going to send that data to all the databases like Scopus. If it's a journal that only publishes once a year, then you probably need to understand when do they publish, because if they publish in November and your paper is accepted in February, then it could take some time before they're actually going to put your paper out there. And I think that's a good thing to understand when you target a journal is, okay, if I get accepted, how quickly is my paper going to be out in the world? So you need to understand their publication schedule to get a sense of that.
Yeah, I could understand that, because I think some of my colleagues from the academician going for promotions, so they be asked this question, of course, being accepted, but then how soon those papers could be published. But I think you answered those questions. I mean, we have to understand when the paper is going to be published, by the publishers. Anyway, I hope Mr. Alexander answered Sister Farika's question just now. Okay, Mr. Alexander, you may proceed to your new title on finding the right journal to publish in.
Thank you. So I think that's a great bridge to this topic. So finding the right journal is really important. There are more and more journals out there, not only good ones. There are also some dodgy journals that will not be productive places to publish in. So finding a journal, I would say, if you're getting started, ask for advice. If you're young, if you're a student, ask your mentor for advice what the right place to publish is. You could ask your colleagues and your peers for recommendations on a good journal. So people who understand your field. Typically, if we work in a faculty or a department, and we're working with other people that are active in the same area, peers will have their own experiences and their own knowledge of different journals. So don't be afraid to ask and just talk about it. So that's one thing. Librarian. So every library has a wealth of information. So you could ask if there's someone at the library that has any insights into good places to publish. You can use a place like Scopus, a database, to look at articles that, well, obviously you know who you've cited. So if you write a paper, your manuscript will likely have references referring to other research. So look at those journals. Are those journals that that you could target? You could look at the papers which you've read, so the papers which you referenced, and look in the references of those papers. So that's something you can do in Scopus, is if your paper is based on reading, I don't know, 50 other papers, and those 50 other papers, each one of them has references, you can look in those references. That's all pretty easy to do in Scopus, because if you save your the papers that you're reading, you save them as like a list or something, then you can easily open those papers and look in the references and get a sense of which journals are there. You have author profiles in Scopus. So when I was doing research, I quickly noticed there were like 3, 4, 5, 6 authors in the world that were specialized in the exact topic that I was interested in. So it made sense for me to look very closely at those authors, at their papers. But you could also easily see which journals are they publishing in. So that's a data-driven way to look at what you're reading, what you're citing, and look at the authors who you're reading, look at where they're publishing. That should give you some hints. Other aspects to think about are manuscript format. So are you writing an original research article, or are you writing a review? Do you have any requirements? Does your funding body require you to publish in an open access journal? Are you looking for something, so is your research rather subject focused, or is it perhaps more multidisciplinary? Do you have a publisher that you want to target? So if your university said, we really want you to publish with Elsevier, then that's already going to limit, the journals that you could publish in. Are you publishing only a paper, or are you thinking of also publishing a data set? So increasingly, researchers are publishing not just a paper, but they're also publishing the data set. And some journals are allowing you to publish your data set and allow your data set also to be connected to your article and cited and so forth. So those are some considerations. Number of questions. If you use those previous steps and you find some possibilities, right? So you've made a short list of journals that you think might be a good match. A question might be, is the manuscript the right fit for the journal? So do read the aims and scope of the journal. Every journal has a very clear aims and scope on their website that says, this is what our journal is about. This is what our focus is. One of the key reasons for rejection is that the paper doesn't match the specific mandate or focus area of the journal. So it's important. Go to the journal website, understand their aims and scope, see if what you're working on is a match. If it's not, look for a different journal. The website can not just show you the aims and scope, but it will show you the subject areas that they cover, disciplines, whether it's international or regional in focus, what types of articles they accept. So there's always this guide for authors. Read very carefully the guide for authors, understand your journal. Institutional mandates. So as mentioned, sometimes your institution or a funder might mandate certain requirements with regard to publishing a paper. So sometimes a funder will say, you can have this money, you can do the research, but you must publish in an open access journal. Nice. So in that case, you might need to look at only open access journals, and that's also easy to do in Scopus.
Mr. Alexander, just now, you mentioned twice about open access. Perhaps can you clarify further, what does it mean by open access, or how best that we could see whether the journal is and fall under open access category?
Sure. So I'll go to Scopus to demonstrate this, but So if I search for just a topic like Malaysia, I can link through to the publisher to read an article, right? There are two forms of publishing. You have the publishing model where it's subscription based. So, for example, Science is a very famous journal, right? And to read the full text, you need a subscription to Science.
Okay.
So you have thousands of journals in the world. Some of them are subscription based. It means that you can only read the full text if you have a subscription or if you pay to get access to the full text. So this is called subscription model. Typically, it's the library of the university that buys a subscription to many different packages of journals. So libraries have subscriptions to journals from the major publishers. And that means that all of the researchers, faculty, students, when they go online in the library or online at the university, they can link from Scopus to the full text, right? To view it publisher. And then when they get to this page, they will have access to the full text because their institution subscribes to this publisher's content. So that's a subscription model.
I see.
However, about, I think 15 years ago, you got a movement that's called open access. Open access basically is a movement where journals that are open access, all of the full text is absolutely free. So there's no subscription required. But to publish in an open access journal, because the journal still needs money to operate, right? So their operating model is different. You have to pay an article processing fee, or there's article processing cost, APC. So you, as a researcher, to publish in an open access journal, once your manuscript is accepted, you have to pay a fee, and it can be quite expensive. Let's say it's $1,000 US, and you pay that fee. The journal will publish your article, but it will be freely available to everyone. So there's no paywall. Anyone with internet can read the paper, right? So it's a different model. In the subscription model, it's the readers that are paying because the institutions are paying to get access to the content. In open access, it's the researcher that's paying. And once the researcher has paid, the reader doesn't need to pay. So it's a different model, and Scopus has both models. So any search that you do, here we see, I just searched for the search term Malaysia, I see 108,000 documents. If I want to look at only the documents that are published in open access journals, I can limit, and you see about 30% of the papers were published in open access journals. And you just be able to link through to the full text regardless of whether your university has access or not. That's what it is. Some funding bodies have a requirement. They say, if you're going to use our money to do research, we want you to publish it open access. So that means you must publish in an open access journal. It also means you have to pay that article processing cost.
Yeah. Okay.
Question 3, is the journal read in the communities that you wish to reach? So if we publish somewhere, we probably want to think about who's reading our content. And more, there are journals have like a website, and you can see some statistics on who the readers are. So it's worth thinking, if I publish in this journal, who's going to read my work? Because who reads it is also going to limit how many citations you're going to receive, and ultimately the impact of your work. So you probably want to avoid publishing in journals that aren't going to reach the audience that you want to reach. You might want to look at, is the journal indexed in PubMed or in Scopus or in Web of Science, right? So if it's indexed in those databases, it's also going to reach a wider audience. Is there a reasonable chance of acceptance? So you want to target a journal that is the right, a I think, the right quality level. If we're going to aim really high, we probably going to find that the top journals have incredibly high rejection rates. Elsevier's journals, you can see what the rejection rates are using the Elsevier Journal Finder. But that's some information you might want to look at, is get a sense of, if I submit here, do I have a chance? Because if chances are very low, waiting to get rejected and then publishing elsewhere is going to take a lot of time. So we want to have a realistic sense of targeting a journal that's the right level for us. Mentioned already, is it published in Scopus or Web of Science? So it is important to do. Don't believe what everyone tells you. There are many predatory journals. So these are journals that are not authentic scientific journals, but they are bad actors using the context of scientific publishing to make money. So there's a lot of kind of, bad guys out there that start a journal and it looks real, and they go to researchers and tell you lies. They tell you, we're indexed in Scopus, we're indexed in Web of Science. They might steal the name of a different journal, so it looks like it's actually a real journal. But once they will accept you very quickly. They will chase after you. Too eager, right? So that's always a sign. These are often not real journals, and they're lying. And when you publish in them, it's a complete waste of time. So don't believe everything that people tell you. You need to do a bit of research about what journal you're publishing in. Metrics. I'm going to show you some of the key metrics that can help you understand the differences in journal quality. So I'll show you that very carefully. Back to the question of predatory publishing or journal ethics, is that because there's so much pressure on researchers to publish, and because open access model is now accepted, so it's accepted for a journal to charge money to an author. All they have to say is, we're an open access journal. To publish in us, you have to pay a fee. A predatory journal typically will be very aggressive. They will chase after you. They will be a little bit too eager. So a good journal is incredibly selective. It's very difficult to get indexed. So if a journal is really too eager to get your content, and if it shows no real peer review, check if the information on the website is right. You might find very limited information about who is on the editorial board. They might offer acceptance within 48 hours, or so there's a lot of kind of journals out there that are pretending to be real journals that are not. And sometimes they steal the name of a real journal, and it can be kind of hard to figure out. So do your due diligence. If there are journals chasing after you, consider that maybe they're not what they say that they are. Good journals don't chase after people.
Yes.
Good journals are difficult to publish in. Good journals have great websites. You can see exactly who the editorial board is, what their aims and scope are. They're not using Gmail address. Good journals do not ask you to pay the article processing cost before acceptance. So that's also a warning sign. If they're very focused on the money, don't give people your money right away. It's a bad idea. So some of the checklists you can do is, can you confirm that you find that journal in the tools for the databases? For example, the list in Scopus Web of Science. Is the journal enrolled in the Committee for Publications Ethics? So in COPE, is it clear who owns the journal? Is it owned by some reputable society or a publishing house, or does it look to be more unknown who owns it? Is it clear who the editorial board is? Is it clear what type of peer review they do and how that works? Is it clear when the APC, the article processing cost, is timed? Do your due diligence. Have a good look at the journals that you're targeting. The ones that are over eager, quite often it's a bit risky. So I know in Malaysia there are also these paper brokers. They're these third parties. They go and solicit researchers and solicit universities, and they tell you, if you pay us a consultancy fee, we guarantee that X number of your papers will be published in Scopus journals. And this is illegal. They cannot make that promise, first of all. Any journal that's in Scopus should judge the manuscript purely on the basis of quality. So there are a lot of kind of people trying to make use of academic publishing to make money for themselves. And today with internet, anyone can build a website, anyone can steal the name of an existing journal and confuse everyone. So I think it's kind of, you kind of got to get your street smarts, like when you're on the street in a city and someone offers you something and you have to think, is this person for real? Maybe what they're telling me is not the truth. Maybe they're a desperate person that's trying to get something from me. And unfortunately, in today's internet world, we have to kind of be the same way, that not everything is not always as it seems.
Mr. Alexander, if a paper is published in a non-open access journal, but the author decided to upload it to ResearchGate, for example, is doing that ethical?
If you do, so every time you publish in a journal, the journal will give you clear guidance on what you're allowed to do with your manuscript. So it differs depending on the what the journal is offering. So some of them allow you to keep your manuscript on an open place. Some of them have an embargo where you're allowed to do it after a certain amount of time. So it really depends on the particular journal, and that's something to look at when you publish with that journal, what agreement you've made. I think that some authors didn't honor the agreement with the journals, and some of them have put stuff on ResearchGate. And in that case, the journal might ask you to take it down because they would cite the agreement that you signed. So I think anytime you publish somewhere, I think there are certain T's and C's that are involved. So have a look at those T's and C's and think about what that means for you. If it's super important to have your manuscript also on a repository or ResearchGate or elsewhere, that just look for a journal that allows that, or understand under what circumstances they allow that.
Okay, all right.
Journal ethics is the journal a peer review, so it's very important to check that the peer review is a real peer review, and that they're not making any, promises like we'll do a peer review within 1 week, or you should pay the APC upfront. These are clear warning signs that it's trouble. So I think we've covered most of this now already. Another great place to go, obviously, is Scopus, to look at which journals are in Scopus. I will show you how to do this. If you view the Scopus source list, which you access via here, you can download the complete list of journals that are in Scopus. And you can choose whether to download that list with articles or titles only, but I'll show you how to get that. Also via this link, and I will share this these slides will be available to the audience today. You can download the complete source title list here, and this includes the specifications of which journals were discontinued in Scopus. So as mentioned, we sometimes have to stop indexing journals that no longer meet the quality criteria. So you can see which journals those are. And at what date we stopped. So we keep the older content in Scopus, but we stop the forward indexing of journals that we discontinue. I'll just quickly show you some of that. So we're back in Scopus, and this is the landing page to Scopus, right? And if you want to go to understand the journals, we're going to go to the top here. Now, here we see 43,000 titles. That includes active and non-active. You can search for different aspects. So you can, if you know the title or the ISSN, you can search. But I think subject area is a great way to do it, because you've got 27 main subject areas and 333 disciplines. Mm-hmm. So if we are into religious studies, so let's say that I'm publishing a manuscript that I consider to be most related to religious studies or philosophy, I could use that filter and see that there are 1,315 titles in Scopus. I can look through some of these here. If I look at the psychology of religion and spirituality, there are three metrics here that I can use to understand the relative quality of the journal. Site score, SGR, and SNP. I'm going to focus on site score. Site score represents the average number of citations received by the papers in the journal. So you can see that 153 papers in this journal were cited 687 times. So it's an average of 4.5 citations per paper. And we see that this journal ranks number 1 of 491 journals in religious studies. And it ranks number 49 of 289 journals in social psychology. I can see the rank. So if I'm interested again in religious studies, I can see this is number 1 journal, number 2 in terms of quality. So this gives me a great way to select journals related to a particular discipline and understand the relative quality of that journal. So if I look through these, and I like this review of religious research. So you can see many things. This one's published by Springer Nature, ISSN. We can see what it's related to. You can see the quality metrics. But obviously, as a researcher, I might want to look at the papers, right? So I might want to look at, if I sort it by date, I might want to look at the papers that have been published and understand, is my paper going to, fit into what they're focused on? So this is going to give you an easy way to see what they're focused on, because you can look at the titles of the papers as well as the abstracts of the papers to look at what they're active in. So that's one way to do it. Another way is you could go to the homepage of the journal. So I think if you just search for the ISSN in Google, so here you're going to find everything about the journal, including their, as mentioned, the aims and scope, right? So you can understand the aims and scope and the submission guidelines here, open access fees and funding. So you can see this open access journal. You can find out all the information about that here. So again, like Scopus can be a starting point. You've seen that this journal is related to religious studies. We've seen that it's relatively impactful. So you can say the quality is relatively high. And then, after Scopus, we can look, if this is a short list of a journal we think might be a good fit, we can look here to understand here, it's explaining exactly what type of peer review they do. Springer Nature is extremely reputable publisher like Elsevier. Open access fees. You can see it's not cheap, right? So you're going to think, do you have the money? Is my funder or my institution going to be able to pay for this?
Yeah.
So you can see it's not cheap to publish in some open access journals. But this one looks very legit, right? You can see that everything is explained in a lot of detail. It's got a reputable publisher. All of the information is available here. So I feel quite strong about this, assuming that my manuscript is a match, that I think the quality of my paper means I have a chance of acceptance, and assuming that I have the right amount of money as part of my funding. So anytime that a funding body says you must publish open access, they should also allow you to use part of the funding provided to you to pay for the publication, right? So you should budget it into your research project.
Right.
So it might make sense before you do everything, you're doing your budgeting, look at some of these journals and see what they're charging. So here you see you're going to need a couple $1,000s, right? So in ringgit, that's it's going to be significant. So did you have a question?
Yeah. One question from Sister Saliza. She tried to merge her two profile, but the instruction is to choose one of the account, but the ID given is different from her Scopus ID. So what ID is that?
I'm not sure what she sees, so it's very difficult for me to answer that. Can you provide a bit more information on what?
Okay. Yeah, I think once Miss Saliza, Sister Saliza, give more details, then I will highlight to you. And there's another question. If the article index in Scopus stated wrong year, can we request to update the year? Is it based on the year of the article published?
Yes. So the any data that's in the data in Scopus should reflect the data on the original research article. So Scopus is a secondary publisher. So the data that we have on any given paper. So let me redo this search here. So the data here should reflect what's on the PDF. So if I view this at the publisher, here the date is 28th of March, 2022. Let's say that here it said a different date. Yeah, so anyway, you can have it changed. And the same way to do that is via the Contact Us. And if you go here to email,
yeah,
document correction, you can say I'm the author, and then select the document correction. Document type correction again. Subject the and you should attach the full PDF. So you should provide the original research article because again we reflect what's on the original research. So so I think you should put a bit of effort into explaining it's wrong. I've attached the PDF. In Scopus, the date is 2022, and the paper, as you see in the attachment, is published in 2021. And then you send it, and it should be changed. It's going to take a bit of time, but you'll get an email back to acknowledge that you've received this, and they'll take care of it. So that's the way to do it. And the way that we found that, again, was at the top of Scopus, there's this question mark. We go to Contact Us. On that Contact Us page, there's a link to press email, and then there's lots of drop-down menus. So there's a lot of different types of corrections that you can ask for.
Yeah, I think the question earlier, I think Sister Saliza can print screen and then upload it together with the email to Elsevier. Then I believe Elsevier team can respond to that related to her Scopus ID just now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's here you could see author profile correction. So if you have a problem, you can also ask the help desk via this form to address that.
Okay. All right.
I just don't know what she sees, right? So it's very difficult for me to give advice on the specific case because I can't see the screen.
Understood.
Do we have further questions before we go to the next section?
So far, we do not have any more questions. You can proceed to the next title.
Okay, so people, identifying potential collaborators. One way to do that is in Scopus. I think the non-Scopus way to do it is to meet people at conferences and events and just talk and network, right? So that's one way to meet people. But you're bound by physical proximity when we do conferences, especially now with COVID. It's much more difficult to meet people in person, especially from other countries. Yet we all do our best to make sure we have an online presence, and that does mean that you can find experts online, different platforms. Scopus is one of those. The way that we do it in Scopus, let me think. It's not Scopus. This is Scopus. Here we go. I would probably do a specific search for the field that I'm active in. So for me, it would be tacit knowledge. Right, so this is a search for tacit knowledge and intelligence. It's a very specific field of research that I'm active in. I was active in. And I find it's specific search. I found just 358 papers. So it's not like a giant area, but if you want to look at something more broad, I'll show you an example of something that's more broad. Now, in this case, I'm not so interested in reading the papers as understanding who's active in the area. So I can analyze search results. And I can see a lot of statistics, including these are the top 10 authors in the world. So that's top 10 in the world. If I want to see who's been active recently, so if I said I don't want to look at, the last 50 years or something, but I want to look at who's been active since last 10 years. Completely different list. I can link through to these people, right? So I can see that, and this person's in Australia, so it's our kind of half of the world. I can see where they've worked. I can see the papers that they've published. And if I want to get in touch with them, probably Google is your best friend. So you just would look in Google. Sometimes there's a corresponding address in there. So sometimes in papers, you have this little envelope here. And that envelope means that you can press that and it's going to open your email and allow you to email the person.
I believe this is a way for the students, for example. I mean, let's say if the university do not subscribe their journals, and then they would like to have a copy of the paper. I mean, the student
Sure.
can write directly to the author to get the full paper.
Yeah, another way to get, let me show you. So sometimes if you select a paper and you look here at full text options, sometimes there's an option to link to the repository. So sometimes there's there's like a manuscript, like a repository version. So that's also check also in Scopus here. But I think now I was talking more about like how to identify experts in a field, and that you can use these profiles, right? So anyone that you're interested in, you could view their profile, understand what they're publishing in, right? You've got all their papers here. And you can get in touch with them. I think the easiest way to get in touch with someone is usually just Google with Queensland Health. So if I do that. So yeah, they've got ResearchGate, they've got LinkedIn. So again, having a profile like on LinkedIn, you can text people, but it should be pretty easy to find their email address on the website of the university. I think it's more about you want to find who is an expert in a field, who is it worth reaching out to. If I go back and do the same search for tacit knowledge and intelligence, but I want to look at, or let's try the really broad area, right? So COVID-19 is a terrible topic. Right, so we see 295,000 papers in COVID-19, and if I analyze the search results, I'll see, yeah, it started in 2019, right? It peaked to a lot of papers, and we can see all of this different stuff, including the top researchers in the world. Now, I'm assuming that most of us, we think, well, I'm not that senior person. I don't think I should be targeting the top 10 researchers in the world, right? You could refine your search to add a search field and say, I want to look only at research that's done in Malaysia. So you see the 3,571 papers published in Malaysia that mention COVID-19. We can analyze the search results and look at, these are the top authors in Malaysia. And if I click on one, we could see that one of them seems to have multiple affiliations. So looks to be linked to Malaysia, not necessarily living in Malaysia at this time. So that's interesting. Let's look at number 2. Monash University, Malaysia. So here, this will give you a lot of information about who they are, right? Their affiliation history. You could read their papers, but I think the trick is do a search that makes sense, right? So you got to isolate your area and then isolate your geography, and then it's pretty easy to look at the profiles and understand who is someone that you might benefit from getting in touch with, right? Maybe you're working on some of the same stuff and you don't know each other. Maybe you've read some of their papers, and you might want to send them an email and say, hey, you know, I do research in a similar field. You know, we live in the same country. Do you want to meet for coffee?
Yeah.
And, you know, why usually if we're passionate about the same things, go meet them. So the profiles are there. You can find all of the people that are active in any area. And then use different filters to narrow it down. Like you could use Malaysia or multiple countries, right? If we did this first search for COVID-19, and then if I scrolled down, and I look at the countries, and I said, all right, I want to look only at Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. All right, 11,000 papers. And again, if I go analyze search results, here we go. So there's a long list of authors here. It's only showing the top 10 here on this graph, but you can see much more than top 10.
All right.
Terengganu, I went there shortly before.
Terengganu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the author profiles are there. They're not just for you to demonstrate to the world. They're also for you to be able to find people and understand where they work, what they're working on, and maybe you could be working together. Maybe you could be drinking coffee together, sharing ideas. Maybe you could share funding. Maybe you can share equipment, resources. Who knows, right? So you don't know until you reach out and start talking to people. And the data is one way to at least understand who's active in areas that you are also active or interested in. Are there questions about that before I go to the next section?
So far, no question. You may proceed to the next title.
Okay, so research metrics. Metrics is like means the same thing as an indicator. So if the economist is speaking about the economy, they might talk about GDP and employment level, inflation, and so forth. So these are different indicators. And the same thing is in research. If we talk about research, we might talk about the quantity of research, scholarly output, or quality, like a citation count. We might be looking at impact metrics, like number of readership or number of citations from patents and so forth. So it's good to understand some of these metrics. And in Scopus, you can see for every article, there are article level metrics. So H index was a metric at the level of the author. It represents the author. Site score was a metric that is at the level of a journal. It represents the overall quality of a journal. Article level metrics represent one article. So anytime we look at an article, we can see how many times it's been cited. We can see how does that compare to world average level citations. So in this case, 3 citations is 69% more citations than world average. Field-weighted citation impact, the world average is 1.00. We can see PlumX metrics, like there are 53 people that added this paper to their Mendeley reference manager. It's been mentioned in 25 news articles, 3 blogs. It's been tweeted 2,000 times and shared on Facebook 3,000 times. So that altogether gives you some indication of how this article is being consumed by others or how it's influencing others. And it's not just citations, it's readership, it's mentions in news and blogs and sharing on social media and so forth. You can see the paper here, right? So No Time to Die, and an in-depth analysis of James Bond exposure to infectious agents. So you can see these metrics. I'll actually show you where they are, but
I see.
I mentioned field-weighted citation impact. It's a great metric because sometimes if your paper is cited 10 times, you don't know, is it a lot, is it a little? The field-weighted citation impact will make it really easy to evaluate. So 1.00 is world average. 0.8 would be 20% less than world average. 1.2 would be 20% more than world average. It's comparing your paper to all the papers published in the same year, in the same discipline, in the same document type. So if you've published a review, it's comparing your review to all other reviews published in the same year in the same discipline. So if your discipline is oncology, it would be comparing your review to all reviews published in the same year in oncology journals. Yeah. So that's a great metric. It makes it really simple to know how highly cited something is. And the others are the PlumX, which I've demonstrated just now. And you can link through to, for every article, you can link through to a dashboard to understand in detail the impact of the paper. This is good for 2 reasons. If you are a reader and I search for something and I find like 5,000 papers, it's like, gosh, I don't have time to read 5,000 papers. I might start reading the papers where I see that it's being mentioned a lot, it's being cited, there's readership, there's mentions in news, social media. There's probably some reason that people are sharing it and talking about it. And I probably want to read that paper to understand what that is. So these metrics can help you as a reader to decide what to read first when we do a search and we find so much content. Secondly, if I'm an author and I've published a paper and I see this dashboard, wow, this gives me a lot of information about the impact of my work. So I can use this to showcase and say, hey guys, like not only I might only have 3 citations, but I have tons of readers and I have 5,000 shares on social media and there are 25 news articles and there's blogs. There's really cool blogs that are mentioning my work. So you can see that there's that your work has led to some impact, impact is not always limited to citations only. So those are the two kind of main reasons, and I'll demonstrate this in Scopus. So if I search for right, vaccine hesitancy. So a lot of us were a little bit like, I don't know. A lot of people are really scared, for some for good reasons, some for crazy reasons. So it's a great topic to look at. Okay, so I did a search and I found 3,000 papers. Now, I don't have time to read 3,000 papers, so I might sort it by the most highly cited paper at the top. So here I get the most highly cited papers at the top of my list, and I might want to look at this top one here, vaccine hesitancy. What can I see? I can see it's been cited 1,248 times, that the field-weighted citation impact is 21 times world average, so it's cited 21 times the world average number of citations. I can link to the full text, but actually, before I do that, I want to understand more. So I can see a number of metrics here that we talked about. So it's been cited in policy documents. It's been cited by news articles, blogs. Now here, this button here, View PlumX Details, will bring me to the PlumX dashboard. And I can see that all of the statistics, including Mendeley readers, news mentions. So if I want to know the policy documents that have cited this paper, I can see here's a policy document. News mentions, I can see that there are 37 news articles, and you can link out to those articles and actually see what it's about and understand, why the paper is being mentioned. Sorry, blogs. So you can also link out to the blogs or Twitter. You could actually see the tweets. So there's this really deep dive, metrics that complement the citations to understand the impact of research. And you just need to, again, do your search, scroll down on the article, and if you open this little box here, metrics, it will show you the metrics. The PlumX dashboard is via this link right here. Okay. So I'll try a different search. So here I see in graphene research, there's one very highly cited paper called The Rise of Graphene. And I can see so this one has been cited by patents. So I can see the list of patents that have cited this paper. So that's really cool, because that's very important kind of, innovation based on a research paper. We can see that there are 15 Wikipedia articles that have cited the paper. There are news articles, blogs. So this is all there. A lot of people don't know it's there. It's pretty easy to access. You just go down the article, open the metrics box.
Another question, Mr. Alexander. I mean, do we have to subscribe to PlumX?
No, you don't. No, it's part of Scopus. So the Scopus subscription includes this as a free part of Scopus.
Another question: does the author get any notification when their paper indexed by Scopus, and does Scopus notify them when their paper being cited?
No, but you can set it up that way. So if, let's pretend I'm Richard Ritter-Inkoff, he's my professor, right? So find yourself, sorry. So if you find your author profile, yeah, make sure that you've created a username. So you need to create a login to Scopus. Now, if this is me, let's pretend that I'm Richard. I can set an alert that I can get an email every week or every month or every day with the new documents that have been published in Scopus, or I can set one up that lists out the citations that I've received. So every time I get cited, it will be listed out in a email that I could get that email every day, every week, or every month. So these types of alerts you can easily set up for yourself or for others, but you do need to create a username, which is really easy to do. You just go to the top right, you create username, you need to fill in your name, email address, it's going to send you an email, you verify it, boom, you've got an account, and you'll be able to set up these alerts. All of your alerts you'll be able to manage here, right? So I can see author citation alerts, document citation alerts, and so forth. So no, by default, Scopus doesn't know who you are. It creates profiles, but it doesn't know your email address unless you create a login, and then you go to your profile and you set up the alert, and then you'll get. You can change the frequency as well, so you can say, "Oh, I don't want to get an email every. I don't want it," or I can say, "All right, okay." Every day is a bit like extreme, so maybe I'll do it every month on the 1st or the 5th or whatever. You can change them from active to inactive. If you don't want to stop receiving emails for a while, you can delete them, you can make changes to them.
Okay, very interesting. Actually, for your information, I've learned a lot of things today. There's so much data from your side.
Yeah, it is a lot to cover. So I hope I don't overwhelm everyone. Let's see what else we have today. The final topic today is how Scopus selects journals for indexing, and it's potentially a long story. I won't spend too much time on it. I think for this audience, the important thing to understand is that Scopus is curated, and that's what makes it different than Google Scholar or some other databases, which, like Google collects information, but it doesn't select. It doesn't make differences in quality, right? So Scopus is very focused on, we want all of the research in Scopus to be genuine, peer-reviewed science. So we have to keep the standard high. So there's a process by which journals can submit to say we want to be included in Scopus, and they will be evaluated. We receive about 3,500 submissions every year. About 39% of those meet the minimum criteria to be in Scopus. So a lot of them, we receive them, we look at them, and we immediately reject them because we can tell them you don't meet the minimum criteria. For example, they may be a journal that does not do peer review. It does not meet the minimum criteria. The journals that do meet the minimum criteria go to a content selection advisory board, which is a group of people that evaluate the journal based on criteria that I'll show you later. And just 46% of those are accepted. So ultimately, of the, say, 3,500 journals that are submitted to Scopus, we're accepting just like 600 of them or so. So we're very selective. A lot of journals get frustrated. They say it's so difficult to get into Scopus. We have to do it because the quality level has to be difficult, or it has to be high. It's not to say that we want to make it life difficult for anyone, but we have to keep the quality high. The journals that are in Scopus are constantly being reevaluated. So any journal that changes in terms of quality, like it goes down, maybe the journal gets a different group of editors, maybe the journal gets sold to a different publisher, and they change their practices. If they no longer meet the quality criteria, we can discontinue the journal. Our journals come from many different publishers. Only 11% of the journals in Scopus come from Elsevier. Only 40% of the journals come from the major publishers. 60% come from smaller publishers. So we select based on quality of the journal. It doesn't matter who publishes the journal. It's really the quality that matters. So it could be a university that publishes the journal, or even an independent journal. I mentioned the Content Selection Advisory Board. They're a group of 17 subject chairs. They are not employed by Elsevier, so they are prominent researchers from many countries around the world who have agreed to work together with Scopus, and they set the mandate for what journal should be in Scopus. They've created the criteria, and ultimately when a journal submits to Scopus, one of these people will evaluate the journal. So each one is an expert in a different subject area. That's why there's 17 of them. So if your journal is a medical journal, it will go to the person who is the chair for medicine, and they will ultimately make a decision whether the journal is accepted or rejected from Scopus. They do this on an ongoing basis, so it's not something they do once a year, twice a year. It's something that they're constantly doing. They try to meet in person twice a year. That's been difficult with COVID, but the idea is that this group gets together physically in a room twice a year to discuss how to keep the quality of the content and relevance of the content in Scopus at a maximum. The Scopus mandate is at a journal level, so they select journals. They don't interfere with the publication practice of the journal. So that's to say, if a journal is accepted into Scopus based on the holistic quality of the journal, every paper that the journal publishes will get published in Scopus. We don't interfere with what they're doing. However, if we see that many of their papers are bad quality or if there are ethical problems, we could, of course, discontinue the journal. But we don't interfere with the editorial autonomy. We don't tell them like, oh, you can publish these papers, but not these, right? So it's really at a journal level. We accept the journal holistically. That means we trust that this journal and the people managing the journal will do a great job in selecting the right papers. The minimum criteria that I mentioned are that the journal is peer-reviewed. It must have 2 years of publication history with an ISSN number. Must be peer-reviewed. Abstracts must be in English. So the journal can be in any language, but the abstracts and title must be in English. Must be a regular publication. So it means they must have a set schedule. Whether that's once a year or 4 times a year, it doesn't matter, but it must be a regular publication. It can't be that they skip a year or they publish 4 times in 1 year and 2 times in another year. We used to have a criteria that mandated Roman script references, but because we're very keen to get more content from countries like Thailand, for example, where some of the references are not Roman script, we're actually looking at not mandating Roman script references. A strong publications ethics statement is needed, again, because predatory publishing is such an issue. Every journal must have a homepage that has a very strong publications ethics statement. Any journal that's submitted that does not clearly meet these minimum criteria will immediately be rejected. So they will not go to the actual CSAB. It will be an administrative unit that looks at this and says, oh, very clearly this journal does not meet it. If it does meet it, the title will be reviewed by the CSAB according to these 5 buckets, where each one has a lot of specifics. And I could literally speak for hours on this topic, but the journal needs to have a very convincing editorial policy, right? I talked about every journal has an aims and scope. That aims and scope needs to be well defined. It needs to have conviction and clarity on what the journal covers. They're going to look at the peer review. They're going to look at the editorial board, who these people are. Is the editorial board geographically diverse, right? So if the journal has an editorial board and everyone comes from the same institution, then maybe that's not a great journal for Scopus. So they're preferring journals with some diversity in terms of where the editorial board come from, but it depends on the aim and the scope. So if a journal is an international journal, there's some expectation that the editorial board come from different countries. If the journal is a ASEAN journal covering Southeast Asia, then they will expect that the editorial board come from different countries in Southeast Asia. If the journal is Malaysian, maybe it makes sense that most of the editors are from Malaysia, but they will prefer if the editors come from different institutions in Malaysia, and not everyone is from IIUM or from UKM. The same is true for authors. If it's an international journal, they will expect that the authors that are published in the journal come from different countries and are covering different topics related to different countries. If the journal is an Asian journal or APEC journal or ASEAN journal, it makes more sense if most of the authors are from ASEAN region. If it's a Malaysian journal, it makes sense that most of the authors are from Malaysia, but they will prefer if they don't all come from the same institution, right? Quality of the content is really important. So they're going to look at the papers, they're going to look at the abstracts, they're going to look at how good is the language, how readable are the articles, are they well structured, are they well written, is the methodology section right, is the abstract covering the whole paper, right? Some abstracts are just like an introduction. It says this paper looks into the history of architecture in Thailand, but it might not explain the method and the findings and the conclusions. So because Scopus is an abstract and citation database, we don't have the full text. Means it's very important that the abstracts are quite comprehensive. So the abstracts need to really be well written and also cover a significant portion of the paper. The papers need to be conform with the aims and scope of the journal. So if the journal says we publish in marine biology, but when we look at the journal is publishing papers that are not related to marine biology, then that's not good, because it means that the editorial process is not able to be strict enough to limit the publications to the stated aims and scope. So I would say throughout this whole thing, the aims and scope is a central part, and all of the other things are evaluated in context of the aims and scope. They are going to look at the citedness of the journal. So a journal that's not yet in Scopus can already be cited by papers that are in Scopus. They're going to look at the editorial board and look at, are those people prominent researchers, or are they otherwise qualified to run a professional journal? They will look at the regularity of the journal, and if there are delays. So if it's a journal that publishes 4 times a year, do they manage to keep to 4 times a year? And online, they're going to, the content has to be available online. They're going to look at the website. It must have either an English website or dual language. All of that together, they will take into consideration and make a decision. And you can see that the rejection rates, acceptance rates, rejection rates are higher in some places than others. So if we look at Malaysia between 2011 and 2019, you can see 57 journals were accepted, 106 were rejected. So a lot of journals submitted to Scopus before they were ready. Maybe they didn't understand what was needed, right? So part of what I do is I work together with editors. So I've spent a lot of time professionalizing our editorial workshops. So I work together with the Ministry of Higher Education, what used to be called Malaysia Citation Center, to give editor workshops at a national level in Malaysia. I've also worked with the Thai Citation Index in Thailand to create a local Scopus board, which we wanted to roll out across the ASEAN region. It's something that's in progress, but we wanted to have a local board which will pre-select journals and help them to improve before they get submitted to Scopus. Thirdly, we also have a platform called Digital Commons, which is it's an institutional repository, but it also is a a platform that provides professional workflows and home pages for journals. So it does the whole editorial workflow and submitting manuscripts and assigning a manuscript to peer review. And that whole process can be done in Digital Commons, as well as having a professional homepage that has search engine optimization, so all of the content ranks very high on Google and this type of thing. So that's also one way that we help local journals to have the best chances of being indexed in Scopus. So that, in a nutshell, is the process and the criteria. That is all the slides that I had to present today. It's a lot, so we'll see if there's any time for questions. Luckily,
Yes.
that was everything I had to present. Yeah.
Okay, we have the answer. I mean, the additional information from Dr. Saliza. So basically, if we want to merge two profiles, there are two options, like to change to ID XX, keep current association ID XY, or another one, remove any association. So which one I should choose? Because different ID, but both are my profile.
So what are the options again?
The first one, keep current association, and then the second one, the second ID is remove any association. So
I'm not sure what it means with association. I would just keep current association.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope Dr. Saliza clear with the clarification. But again, can use also to email Elsevier, and they have professional teams to address all the questions. Oh, by the way, Mr. Alexander, last time I came across Schemago. Then, so what is the relationship between Schemago and Scopus?
Great question. So if I go back to sources here and I search for a journal in food science, here, advances in nutrition. Remember, I mentioned there are three journal metrics. Here we have site score, SJR, and SNP. So site score is the Elsevier journal metric. I explained it already. SJR stands for Schemago Journal Rank. This is a journal metric, so it also represents the quality of the journal based on citation analysis, except the calculation is different than site score. And it's not an Elsevier metric. It was created by a Spanish researcher who has his own company. He calls his company Schemago, and they're a partner of Elsevier. So they are not Elsevier. We work together with them. He's a bibliometric expert. And you can, because he's not part of Elsevier, he has his own website. So if you go to SJR Journal Rank, he has this website. And on this website, you can see all of the Scopus journals. So this is literally all the journals that are in Scopus. And you can see the journal quartile based on SJR. So very important is if as a researcher you have a KPO that says you must publish top quartile journal, the first question you must ask is which journal metric are you talking about? Are you talking about site score? Are you talking about SJR? Are you talking about journal impact factor? Are you talking about SNP? You need to get clarity on that, because which journals are Q1 in site score and which journals are Q1 in SJR will correlate quite strongly, but is not identical. So it can happen that a journal is Q1 in SJR and it might be Q2 in site score, vice versa. So you need to really have clarity on, if someone says you have to publish top quartile journal, ask them which quartile which journal metric are we talking about? And again, you've got three journal metrics in Scopus. You've got journal metrics in other databases like Web of Science. So you got to figure out which one are you using. Obviously, this, if it's a Scopus one, you've got three here. For two of them, you can easily determine the quartile. For SNP, it's a little bit more difficult. Does that help?
Yeah, very clear. Another question. We have in our faculty, they are registered with my site, and then they would love to upgrade it to Scopus, indexed by Scopus. So and then I heard last time that you need to have a continuous publishing for 3 years, then you are eligible to apply for Scopus indexing. I mean, does the condition still the same or different nowadays?
You need two years of publication history with an ISSN.
2 years, yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Two years with an ISSN and a regular schedule. Okay. And all the other, all the other minimum criteria. Okay. And that's a minimum, right? And my my recommendation is to always wait with the submission until you're really confident that you meet not just the minimum criteria, but that you meet the other criteria. Rejection rate is high, and every rejection comes with an embargo. So not only do you get rejected, but Scopus will tell you you cannot submit again for like 3 years or something, right? So a rejection letter will give reasons. They will say, for example, the aims and scope of your journal are too general, and this results in your journal covering a collection of different, fields which are not connected, and we see that your papers are not cited at all. So that makes that your journal is not a good fit for Scopus. We recommend strongly that if you want to be in Scopus, that you tighten the aims and scope of the journal, ensure that you have adequate, editorial control to ensure that you're publishing papers in line with the aims and scope, and that you increase the citations of your paper, something like that, right? But they will also tell you you're free to submit back to Scopus it can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So that's a long time to wait. So it is counterproductive to submit too early. It's best to wait until you really understand these criteria and that you can see that you have a real chance, then you want to do it. But if you do it early and you get a 5-year embargo, oh man, it's gonna be so disappointing.
Yes. Okay. So far we do not have any more question, but I have last question before we end our today session.
Sure.
What would you advise to our young researcher or the postgraduates students? Because sometimes the requirement in the university before they need to submit for their thesis for viva is that they need to publish, at least one Scopus journal, and then sometimes they feel scared with, Scopus. So what would you advise to the young researcher?
So they have a KPI that they need to publish one paper in Scopus.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to think about, you're probably not going to get published in a quartile 1 or 2 journal, right? So unless you have the right collaborator, you need to find the right realistic type of journal that you're going to publish in, but you don't want to aim too low or fall into the hands of a predatory journal. So I think if we're thinking, I just want to make the KPO, I don't care about anything else, and you get, emailed by some group that says, oh, we're this journal that's in Scopus and we really like your paper and we want, for $500 you can publish in our journal and we'll be in Scopus, is be like a detective, like make sure that this is for real. And if they're too desperate, too eager to get your paper, very likely it's a group that's just trying to get your money, right? And your paper will not get into Scopus. And if it does, and we find out that a journal is having predatory practice, then maybe we're going to remove this journal and your paper from Scopus, right? So you always want to, the priority must be the ethical soundness of the journal. And that means that we ourselves as researchers have to kind of be ethical in not, if we have any doubts, if the warning signs are there, don't do it. So do the due diligence. You might want to look at the journals that are in Scopus. Make sure that you research the homepage of the journal that you're looking at. If there are two home pages, that means one of them is a fake one, right? So then you have to figure out which one is the real one. Talk to your peers, talk to your mentors, do your home, basically be a little bit like a detective, especially if you're young and you want to publish that one paper. It's in Scopus, so you're not going to aim for the top. If you're aiming for the lower levels, that's fine. And we purposely put a lot of journals into Scopus so that it covers like a broad spectrum of content. Unfortunately, it does mean that sometimes when you're aiming for, let's say Q4 or Q3, you might get into contact with, it might not be clear to you if you're publishing in a real journal or if it's a fake journal or a predatory journal. So you just have to be really careful. I think we're trying to provide more education about that, how to approach that process and how to identify if a journal is authentic journal or if it's predatory. I think the main warning signs are that they're very eager and you can't figure out who runs the journal. They communicate via Gmail. They're not connected to a publisher or to an institution that you know. So especially the eagerness is a warning sign. Other than that, my advice is be passionate. You know, if you write a strong manuscript, so if you really do your work well and you cultivate your own passion in a particular topic, that passion, it will pay dividends in your life, I think. And part of it will mean, hopefully, that you'll be able to write a strong manuscript. And the stronger manuscript that you write means that you can aim a little bit higher and not get into a situation where you yourself are a little bit desperate. So that I think that's the main thing, actually, is try to do something where you're really getting the best quality out of yourself. That's good for your education. It's good for the world, but it'll also put you in a position that you can aim a little bit higher, and that's going to help you to avoid that type of dilemma, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Alexander, for a very insightful sharing session on Elsevier and also Scopus. I just would like to highlight here a request by the official IIUM libraries that for the participant to complete this survey and then to get the certificates. So you can scan this QR code, okay, then rating our performance. The first question is important to us, okay. I believe this survey is for improvement for future. Okay, again, I would like to conclude that I really appreciate our International Islamic University Library initiative to make event closely with our publisher so that they know what are, the do and don'ts that they need to follow or not to follow, yeah, and then again to take care on the ethical matters, yeah, and then because I believe talking about, the info that you given just now, to upgrade the faculty journals to Scopus, and then the issues about embargo. So I believe those information would be very, very helpful to our new young journals. But then nevertheless, those journals also, who already in the Scopus status, they also need to maintain the consistency and again, to maintain the quality as mentioned by Mr. Alexander. And then last but not least, as I mentioned, I've learned a lot of things today, because in your website, the metrics and then the data that you have, could help the future researcher to find the right papers, yeah, to find potential partners, yeah, for publication, or maybe to jointly apply for international grants. So on behalf of the library, IIUM, so I would like to say thank you to Mr. Alexander. So we really hope that we could meet up again, yeah, and we will welcome you again to IIUM library live, yeah.
I would love to visit in person. That would be fantastic. I'm planning a trip to Malaysia later this year, and I'd love to drop by IIUM.
Yeah.
One comment about this survey. So the rating is important, but once you finish the survey, you'll be linked to a platform. You have to use the workshop code. So on the bottom right, you see a workshop code TTUYAA. So please note that number. You might want to just take a picture of the screen now, because you won't be able to get the certificate unless you fill in that workshop code. It's a platform called Researcher Academy. The certificate will use whatever you fill in for your username. So if you don't have a username for the platform, it will ask you to quickly make one. So whatever name you fill in, that's what it will display on the certificate, right? And again, you have to use this QR code or the bit.ly link there, and you have to have the workshop code TTUYAA all in capitals. For the rest, I hope it was helpful. I hope that it's useful to you in some way, and we'll have to see next time if we do virtual things or if we can do something in person. I think sometimes trainings virtual is quite easy to reach a larger audience, but I do miss seeing people in person as well. So.
Okay, so with that, I would like to end today's session, and then we'll see you again. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Alexander, for joining us. And then on behalf of the library, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Alexander. And again, all the best to the young researcher and also IIUM academician. So let's hope to see more publisher series in the future time. With that, I close today's session by reciting Surah Wal-As and Tasbih Kifarah. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Alexander.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Okay,
Take care.
bye. Take care.